It's Parshas Vaeschanan. And this is an absolutely loaded Parsha. And I'll tell you, I'm always on the lookout for new books that I could buy that maybe will provide more material, more content, more insights, more angles that I can use on the Parsha podcast. I have a simple rule of thumb. If I suspect that there's a book or even a series of books that will potentially help me create even one episode, I'm just going to buy it. It's a business expense. So a couple of days ago, I was perusing a new book to see if I ought to buy it. And it was a book on the book of Devarim. It was commentaries, it was insights, questions, analysis. And I look at the table of contents, and Parshas Devarim, there's 10 pages on one Parsha. And then I look at Parshas Vaeschanan, this week's Parsha, and there are 150 pages of commentary, of analysis on this Parsha. There is so much to talk about in this week's Parsha, so many iconic verses. And I'll tell you, that book that I mentioned, it's already in my cart. Please God, we're going to order it and we'll read it, please God, and hopefully glean some insights that will enhance the Parsha podcast. But the Parsha begins where Devarim left off. Moshe is talking about the events of the preceding 40 years. He spoke about some of the mistakes that the nation made. He spoke about some of the decisions that were made to add lieutenants, the whole saga of sending in the spies, the scouts to go reconnoiter the land. He spoke about the various interactions that they had with the empires, the nations on the east bank of the Jordan, with Esav and Edom and the Moabites and the Vaeshanites and the Amorites. And in our Parsha, he begins by talking about what he wanted. Moshe was successful in conquering a lot of land on the east bank of the Jordan, but of course, the prize, the ultimate prize, is what lies on the west bank of the Jordan, in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel. And Moshe was condemned in the book of Numbers to not be allowed to enter. He was going to die before the crossing of the Jordan, and Joshua, his student, his acolyte, his successor, he will lead the nation across the Jordan and conquer those cherished lands. And our Parsha begins, Vaeschanan, Moshe is telling the nation, I pleaded with God. He was pleading with God to be allowed to cross over the Jordan and to conquer the land. Maybe God would relent. Maybe Moshe would be able to repent, to atone, to cleanse, to expiate the sin that he did, and to have this terrible decree reversed and annulled. But God said no. God said, don't ask again. Exodus tells us that Moshe prayed 515 times to be allowed to enter the land, and notwithstanding all his prayers and all his intercessions, he was barred from entering the land. God says, don't speak to me about this anymore. Joshua, he's going to lead the nation into the land. You're going to expire. You're going to pass. You're going to be buried on this side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan, and Joshua will lead the nation across the Jordan and to conquer the land. So just to get us started here, I find it fascinating that we see how Moshe, he's a legend. He's the greatest of all time. And no one argues that Joshua was greater than Moshe. Everyone agrees that Moshe was greater than Joshua. Yet Joshua's going to succeed where Moshe failed. The successor, he's going to pull off what the original legend was unable to do. The student, Joshua on some level, is going to outshine the master. God tells Moshe, take Joshua, v'chazkehu v'amtzehu, encourage him, strengthen him. He shouldn't be scared. He shouldn't be worried. He shouldn't be stricken with fear. Then maybe he'll be punished, just as you were punished. Joshua may have reason to suspect, well, if Moshe, the great Moshe, if he was punished because of the nation, because of the sin, because of the circumstances, and he was not allowed to enter the land, maybe the same fate awaits me. I too will be punished. God tells Moshe, tell Joshua, I promise you, you will cross the Jordan. You will inherit the land. And if you look at Rashi points out, not only is Joshua being told that he will not suffer the same fate, he will succeed. Moreover, Rashi tells us, Ki hu ya'avor, he will cross over the Jordan. Im ya'avor lifnehem, yinchalu. If Joshua will cross over and lead the nation in the conquest of the lands on the west bank of the Jordan, then the nation will acquire it. But if not, if Joshua, for whatever reason, does not lead the conquest of Canaan, no one will succeed in acquiring the land. So just to get us here started, we're told, broadly speaking, that Moshe, notwithstanding his Herculean efforts, to the contrary, Moshe was condemned and permanently condemned to not enter the land. And Joshua will enter the land. And Joshua is being told that conquering the land is his destiny. Not only could he do it, and he will do it, but only he can do it. Should Joshua opt out, should Joshua not lead the nation, no one will succeed. It will never get done. If you think about this for a second, Joshua is given an impossible task. He is selected to succeed Moshe. Who's Moshe? The greatest man who ever lived, the humblest of all time, the greatest of prophets, the man who spearheaded the Exodus and brought Pharaoh and Egypt to their knees. He split the sea. He secured 40 years of manna for the nation. He defeated the fierce empires of Sichon and Og in battle. He's the one who ascended to heaven, overpowered the angels, extracted the tablets crafted and etched by the finger of God. He gave us the Torah. He emptied the heavens from the Almighty's Torah and brought it here. And Joshua was selected to succeed Moshe as leader of the nation. There are no more cavernous shoes to fill. But Joshua has to go a step further. He has to accomplish what Moshe was unable to do. Moshe has this very fierce prayer salvo. He's pleading, he's begging, and he's told with finality, you will not lead the nation over the Jordan. You're not going to wage the wars of conquest against the 7 Canaanite nations and the 31 Canaanite kings. So Joshua has this very unenviable task of being told you have to outdo Moshe. And how is he encouraged? He's strengthened. He is given a boost. And Moshe tells him, Moshe is emboldening him. Moshe is trying to infuse him with confidence. And he tells him, you and only you can lead the nation across the Jordan. You and only you can wage the wars of conquest of the land of Canaan and parcel out the land to the tribes. And if you want to take it, you will succeed. And if you don't, not only will it fail, but no one will ever be able to do it. There's no one else who's capable of doing this. This mission is yours. And you have no choice but to do it because this is the task that you are chosen for. And I say this tell us that this framework, it's not unique to Joshua. Joshua had a mission, and Joshua's being told, you could do your mission, even though it seems impossible, and only you can do your mission. The truth is, each one of us, we are told, we are selected to do a mission. We are appointed. We are commanded to do some mission in our life. And like Joshua, if we balk at our life mission, it won't get done. Now, in all likelihood, forgive me for bursting your bubble, our mission, your mission, it's not likely to be as grand as Joshua's. But nevertheless, it's going to match Joshua in a variety of ways. just as Joshua was positioned to succeed, he was endowed with the qualities needed to lead the nation, and he had the requisite experience as well, being that he was Moshe's longtime aide. Each one of us to be guaranteed that the qualities needed for our mission and the circumstances of our life, they will all be tailored for our life mission. Our toolbox will be perfectly suited for the task. And like Joshua, we're guaranteed that we'll succeed if we undertake the mission. And like Joshua, there's only a single person in the world who can accomplish our mission. If we don't do it, it will not get done. So just to get us started here, it's a very fascinating insight that we see about how Joshua was positioned for his job. And our sages tell us that we are the same. All of us are the same. We're chosen for a job. We're chosen for a task. We can do it even though it may seem to be insurmountable. It may seem to be impossible. And if we don't do it, it won't get done. Now, this all does raise a question. How indeed was Joshua able to do what Moshe failed to do? Moshe, after all, was able to ascend to heaven. You would think he would be able to cross over the Jordan, right? If he was able to go to heaven and spar with the angels, why can he go to Canaan and spar with the Canaanites? No one claims that Joshua is greater than Moshe. Joshua was the moon, our sages tell us, to Moshe's sun. The face of Moshe was like the sun, and the face of Joshua was like the face of the moon. Joshua is the paradigmatic student. He reflects the light that Moshe shone upon him. Yet for some inexplicable reason, Moshe is unable to do what Joshua succeeded in doing. I think this is a fascinating concept to ponder. Joshua is not as great as Moshe. And yet Joshua was able to do something that Moshe cannot do. And I think it's relevant to the week that we just experienced. We just marked Tisha B'Av again. It's been already more than 1950 years where our nation is mourning the destruction of the temple. And we pray dozens of times a day to rebuild it. And that's a central pillar of our religious life. It's one of the 6 questions that someone is asked by the heavenly tribunal. Tzipisa li Yeshua, did you anticipate? Did you wait? Did you yearn? Did you pine for the day where there will be redemption? And our nation in the last 1950 years, we've had giants. We had Rashi and the Rambam and Rabbi Akiva and his friends and the authors of the Talmud and the Gaonim and the Rishonim, the medieval sages, and the Gaon of Vilna and the Chavetz Chaim and the Chazon Ish. Absolute titans. And there's no one alive today that can claim to be in the same universe as these sages. And all of them dedicated their lives towards trying to bring about perfection in themselves, in their communities, in the nation, in the world. They all wanted to bring Messiah. And they all failed. And they're all greater than us. Not a question. And I think there's some solace here in the story of Joshua. There is a concept, there's a phenomenon where the student, the one who is not as great as his predecessor, they're still able to do something that the predecessor sought to do, tried to do, and failed to do. How can we aspire to bring about, to effectuate Messiah? We have these veritable angels that preceded us, and they all tried to do it, and they were all unsuccessful. We're expected to pull off what the earlier generations yearned for and desperately tried to do and ultimately failed to accomplish. Here we see a precedent. Sometimes smaller people can do and can accomplish the things that the greater people cannot do. There's a lot of different reasons that are offered. And I think it's still worthy of further investigation. There's one idea that the sages offer, and they say, well, the way it works is cumulative. Our nations, like we have a certain amount of righteousness that we need to acquire. And if someone does 99% of the job, but it's not 100%, well, the job is not done. And the subsequent generation, well, they build upon the accomplishments of the preceding generation. So they just need to do 1%. So yes, it's much easier, but it could push us over the line. There's another argument that says that actually, even though we're smaller in our spiritual acuity to the preceding generations, and really we're not comparable in any way to those giants, but our challenges and our difficulties and what we need to overcome, they're greater. And thus, by us succeeding, even though on absolute terms it no way matches that of our predecessors, it pales in comparison to our predecessors. Nevertheless, on relative terms, our small accomplishments could change the whole world. There is a documented conversation between the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the greatest of the Kabbalists, and his student, Rabbi Chaim Vital. And he asked the question, how could it be that, we're like, in the words of the sages, compared to the previous generations, they're like angels and we're like humans. And if they're like humans, we're like a donkey. And not even a special donkey, just an ordinary one. So how could we accomplish what they didn't succeed in accomplishing? And the Arizal told him, in the previous generations, the souls are much loftier. And the spiritual refinement was so much more resplendent. And for them, they had to work so hard to accomplish, to effectuate what we can do with so comparatively little. If someone just cries out to God and they just have a genuine moment of faith, that equals 100 fast days that the sages of yore would do. And I think today, the world has trended so far away from deep spiritually focused life. And the Torah sages today are great, but nothing compared to the ones of previous generations. There's been severe degradation and deprecation on the spiritual plateau. And therefore what we do, yes, compared to the preceding sages, it's nothing, but compared to what we are faced with and the challenges that we have and the spiritual filth that we need to persevere and overcome in heaven on relative terms, that can actually accomplish even more than what the preceding generations could accomplish. But again, it's still something that we need to ponder. What's the logic behind it? There are some theories, but the phenomenon is undeniable. Sometimes small people can outshine their predecessors. Joshua could do what Moshe cannot do, period. That phenomenon is undeniable. I think for us, it's a bit of solace, and it's encouraging to know that we can accomplish great things. And like Joshua, we have to do it. We have to undertake it. And if we do it, we'll pull it off. And if we don't, it won't get done. And the takeaway is very powerful and very deep and a fulfillment of our mandate to go deep and deeper in the Parsha. Let's focus on another theme in the Parsha. There's a very famous verse in chapter 4, verse 4 of our Parsha. Va'atem adveitim b'Hashem Elokeichem, and you who cleave to Hashem your God, chayim kulchem hayom, you're all alive today. The Torah tells us that when we cleave to God, we hold fast to our Creator, we get life, and we get eternal life, and we're alive today, meaning it's whenever you read it, it's still true. There is life that is given to those who connect, who cleave to God. This theme we see in our Parsha, elsewhere. If you go back just a few verses, chapter 4, verse 1, what does the verse say? Ve'ata Yisrael, and now, O Israel, hearken to the laws, to the statutes that I am teaching you today, lema'an tichyu, so that you live. The same idea that we can get life from our spiritual efforts. We cleave to God. We hearken to his laws. We hearken to his statutes, and that will bestow life upon us. That begets life. We've spoken many times in the past about the verse in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 5. Very similar theme. You should guard my statutes, my laws, that a person who does that receives life. And there are, again, many other instances of this theme. You want life. And who doesn't want life? We all want life. That's what we want more than anything else. That's our most primal and basic instinct and desire, to maintain our life and to preserve it and to extend it. And here we see Moshe tells the nation, you want life? Cleave to God, and then you'll get life. And the commentaries tell us that this is more than just a reward for cleaving to God, you get life. That is the mechanism of being a recipient of life. The Maharal tells us there's only one source of life, and that's God. Everything else has no independent source of life. So God is the one who gives life. And if you cling to God, well, because God is the wellspring of life, those who cling to him, those who connect to him, they receive, as a result of their association with God, they receive life. Well, what does this even mean? How do you cleave to God? How do you cling to him? So the Maharal again tells us the way to do that is to cling to the Torah. The Torah, after all, that is the first creation of God. And it's the thing that's most close and effectively indistinguishable from God. And that's why the Torah is called a tree of life for those who hold on to it. And therefore, if you cleave to the Torah, by dint of that, you're actually cleaving to God, and thus you are clinging to the source of life, and by doing that, you receive life. This is a very interesting concept. This should get our attention. Who doesn't want life? That's something that we all desire more than anything else. We all want life. And we have a verse in our Parsha, and there's many verses to this effect in this Parsha and elsewhere, that the way you get life is via this spiritual path, hearkening to the mitzvos, hearkening to the statutes and to the laws, cleaving to God. That's how we get life. And the Mishnah tells us in the end of the book of Pirkei Avos, of Ethics of the Fathers, Gdola Torah, Torah is great. Shehi nosenes chayim, it gives life to those who perform it in this world and in the next world. And the Mishnah cites 9 different verses to support this claim that Torah begets life. Now, if we take this seriously, it should really get our attention. The Almighty himself, via his Torah, is telling us, you want life? I'll give you instructions. Low carb, high protein. That's now the diet of choice. carnivore. Got to do your exercise. Longevity, outlive. Everyone wants to know the answer. What's the elixir of life? And here we're told, again, it's a verse in Scripture, in our Parsha. Cleave to God, you'll get life. Cleave to His Torah, you'll get life. The greatest Torah, the Mishnah tells us, because it gives life in this world and in the next world. But here's the question. Do people who are more spiritual, do they actually have a longer lifespan? Do they have a longer life expectancy? Aren't there people who have nothing to do with God? At least based upon our analysis. They're distant from God in every way, and they're ignorant to His Torah. Don't some of those people have long lives? Yeah, of course, some of the sages really lived very long lives. You think about the greatest sage of our people in the 21st century. So at the beginning of the 21st century, the greatest sage was Rav Shach. He passed away in 2002 at the age of 107. And then succeeding him, it was the next generation. And that was Rabbi Yashiv. And he passed away in 2012. And he, at the age of, I think it was 102 or 103. And he was sharp to the very end of his life. And then the mantle was passed to the next sage, Rabbi Steinman, or Steinman, depends how you pronounce it. I remember reading once an article where it talked about the passing of Rabbi Elyashiv and how it's the next generation. Rav Steinman, 99. He was 99, I think, when he took over as the greatest sage, as the greatest recognized sage of the nation. And he passed away at the age of 103. And then you had the next generation. It was Rabbi Kanievsky. He passed away fairly young. He was, I think, only 94 or 95, something like that. And then Rav Gershon Edelstein, who was also over 100. So there is a phenomenon that we see, the greatest sage as recognized by the preponderance of the people, by the consensus of our nation. They do seem to have long life. But of course, we know stories of great sages who passed away very young. The Arizal, the aforementioned Arizal, didn't make it to 40. Neither did the Orach Chaim, the author of the Orach Chaim, or the Ramchal for that matter. So we see instances of sages dying young. Is this necessarily about lifespan? What does it mean, this theme that we see all over the Torah and in our Parsha? The Torah study, the Torah observance is a key to life. So I want to offer 3 different ideas. I want to suggest, just to get started, that there's no need to have any homiletical interpretations of these words. I want to suggest that on the most basic level, our definition of life, well, what's that? That's maybe a political question as well as a religious, as a scientific question, which you get into the whole discussion. Well, when does life begin? When does it end? And so on. But when we think of physical life, we think of, proteins and amino acids, or maybe a heartbeat, or brain activity, or being conscious. There's probably a lot of different ways that we can describe and characterize life. But physical life, I think, and we'll see the Talmud says this explicitly, I think we can argue that Torah extends a person's physical life. How so? The Talmud tells us that King David, he really wanted to know when he's going to pass. And he tells God, this is featured in Psalms, let me know when my end date is. Let me know. I want to know when I'm going to die, when I'm slated to expire. Now, David was a prophet, and of course the exemplar of a king of our people. And the Almighty responded to his request. David, you want to know when you're going to die? I'm sorry, I cannot tell you. I have a decree that I will never reveal to a flesh and blood the time of their death. But David was persistent. And he says, well, don't tell me when I'm going to die, but maybe just the day, which day it is. And God says, no. Well, maybe what day of the week it is. And to that request, God relented. And God tells David, you're going to die on a Shabbos. I'm not going to tell you which Shabbos, but it's not going to be on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's going to be on a Shabbos. Now, David was very disappointed when he heard that. He didn't want to die on Shabbos. So he tells God, can we push it to Sunday? One more day, right? Well, it's just one day. And God says, no, absolutely not. Why not? Because when you die, the monarchy is passed on to your successor, to your heir, to your son, Solomon, Shlomo. And therefore, I cannot allow you to encroach, to infringe upon his monarchy, his reign. In the words of the Talmud, very iconic words, Ein malchus noga'as bechaverta. One reign, one monarchy will not touch another monarchy, even a hair's breadth. You cannot have even one moment of rule in the time that's slated for Solomon. So David says, oh, you know what? I'm willing to forfeit one day. Let me die on a Friday. I don't want to die on a Shabbos. I don't mind giving one extra day to Solomon. And God responded, no, I'm not willing to do that. Because every day that you're alive, you're studying Torah. And yes, Solomon's going to build a temple and Solomon's going to offer sacrifices. He's going to offer 1,000 sacrifices, but I'd rather have one day of you studying my Torah than 1,000 sacrifices that your son Solomon is going to offer on the altar. So now David has this very important bit of information. He is going to pass away on a Shabbos. I always joke that he wouldn't wear a seatbelt the rest of the week. He would drive like a maniac. That's the joke. But seriously, David knew he's going to pass away on a Shabbos. And he tried to forestall this. He tried to outsmart the angel of death. Once Shabbos began, David began studying. And he wouldn't take a nice Shabbos nap. You know, Shabbos afternoon, you got to take a little nap. He wouldn't take a nap. And he wouldn't even take a sleep at night, Friday night. From the beginning of Shabbos until the end of Shabbos, he studied non-stop. Because David understood that when you're studying to the Almighty's Torah, you become impervious to the angel of death. The only way for you to die is if the angel of death comes and grabs your soul. What if there's a protective fence around it? What if he is barred and disabled from accessing your soul? That's the plan. We'll study Torah, and then we know for sure I'm not going to die on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So as long as I'm studying Torah on Shabbos, I'm safe. And indeed, that's what David did until that fateful Shabbos, when the angel of death was appointed to go extract the soul of David. And he arrives at the palace, the angel of death does. He's got all the paraphernalia. He's got a sharpened sword. He's ready to take the soul of David. But David is inaccessible. David is protected. There's a ring of fire surrounding David through which the angel of death cannot penetrate. So what to do? Imagine the angel of death, and this guy's putting up resistance. So he tries to cause a diversion. The oldest tactic in the world. A diversion. So he goes to the back of the palace, and he takes a tree and starts shaking the tree, causing a ruckus. And David hears it and doesn't fall for it. So he's studying nonstop, but he's going out to investigate what is that noise, that chaos that's coming from the outside. And as he's doing it, he's walking and he's studying nonstop. His mouth is not stopping. And the angel of death sees David coming out, and he pulls a fast one. There's a series of steps from the palace to the gardens in the back. And the angel of death, he pulls one of the stairs, and David trips and he tumbles. And he stops studying. And he stops studying, and that second he comes, angel of death comes, snatches his soul. David has passed. Now the Talmud offers a very interesting postscript to this story. You can find this Talmud, if you'd like to read it, in the book of Shabbos on page 30a, going into 30b. David's now dead, and Solomon is the new king, but David's outside. And the animals are circling. They want a bit of his flesh, and that would be a terrible disgrace, right? The Talmud has an amazing line. The Talmud says that a dead lion is not worth a living dog. David, he was a lion, but now he's dead. And the living dogs, they are now, on some level, they're greater than him. They're better than him. But what to do? The body is mutsa. You can't move it on Shabbos. So the Talmud tells us that if you place something which is not mutsa on top of the corpse of David, then you could actually relocate the body on Shabbos. They put either a loaf of bread or a baby on David's body, and then they could move it. Anyhow, that's the Talmud. I think this is perhaps germane to our question. The Torah tells us in many places that Torah gives a person life. Why? Because if you cleave to God via his Torah, well, you're cleaving to the source of life. And we ask the question, well, some sages die young. Does it mean literally you'll have life the way we define it by cleaving to God and his Torah? So my first suggestion is yes. If someone is studying Torah, at that moment, they are not subject to the angel of death. The angel of death is barred from taking away their soul. They are impervious to it. Now the problem is, of course, you stop for a second, even if there's a diversion, there's some sort of noise or disturbance to your studies, then you're vulnerable. But on a very basic level, we discovered that Torah actually gives you life. You actually have to study. If you want this to work, you got to study nonstop. So I don't know if it's a long-term plan, but certainly on a conceptual level, we see a person cannot die while they're studying Torah. Now it's possible that there might be a certain minimum amount of depth and devotion to the studies. If someone's just, say reading on a very superficial level, they don't understand what they're saying, maybe that would not qualify. That would not push away the angel of death. But on a conceptual level, we definitely see this concept that Torah study extends life. There's another idea. When a person dies, their body is no longer useful to them. Their soul moves on. Their soul ascends to heaven. What is the state of a person's soul in the afterlife? What determines their viability in heaven? So our sages tell us, a person is comprised of 613 parts. A person's body has 613 parts. A person's soul has 613 parts. And the Torah can be broken up into 613 parts. That's what we call mitzvos. General categories of the Torah. And every time a person does a mitzvah properly, they are giving life to the corresponding part of their soul. And a person does all 613 parts of the Torah perfectly, they have now given life to all 613 parts of their soul, and that is the state of their soul after it is extracted from their body. We think of mitzvahs as like, oh, we got to follow what God says. We don't want to be in trouble. We don't want to be punished. God forbid. And that's, of course, true. But Torah gives life. That's what Sages tell us. It literally bestows life upon ourself. We're going to get to heaven. Our soul's going to be removed from our body. What does it look like? How much life did we give it? How much mitzvos, the statutes, the laws, the Torah study did we infuse upon our soul? And that's what we will have to live with in the afterlife for eternity. And that's why we see the body. The body has lots of parts. We know that. But not all parts are created equal, right? You can live without a pinky, maybe without a leg. It's not pleasant, but it's doable. Without a heart or a brain or a liver, well, life is no longer possible. So there's a hierarchy of organs in a person, of limbs in a person, and there's a corresponding hierarchy in mitzvos. And some mitzvos are needed for life. Emunah, the first of the 10 commandments, to believe in God, that's the heart, we're told. And some of them are nice to have, are important, are critical, but it's possible to have some degree of life without them. But what about the parts of Torah that are currently unfulfillable? There are hundreds of mitzvos that no one that we know has fulfilled. How many mitzvos relate to sacrifices and agricultural laws in the land when the temple is extant? What do we do about that? How do we plug in those gaps in our spiritual avatar that are needed from those mitzvos? So the sages tell us that there's one mitzvah that's equal to all the mitzvos put together. And that's Torah study. Torah study is a panacea. It's a cure-all. When we study Torah, we get life. What does that mean? It infuses life into all 613 parts of our soul. And thus the parts of our soul that cannot be addressed, cannot be given life, cannot be given vitality to, because we can't bring a sacrifice, and we don't have the laws of tithing the wheat that grows in our field in the land of Israel. We don't have the corner of our field to leave to the poor person. You can't be a Kohen and a Levite and an Israelite and a king. That's not possible. But you can find the multivitamin that gives life to all parts of a person. Torah study is equal to all the mitzvahs put together. And that's what the verse is telling us. If you cleave to God via His Torah, you'll have life. When will you have life? Today. Well, when's that? If someone lived 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and they fulfilled this dictum, they have life today. We think of someone when they die, it's over. Or let me rephrase that. Not we think that. Some people think that. We call that heresy. If you believe that a person dies and that's it for them, curtains, cut to black forever, that's heresy. We believe that your life actually only begins once you shed your physical exterior. Your real life is what happens when you're just a soul. That's who you really are. And that's your real legacy. And that's your real life. And what we're doing over here is just the pre-life. That's why I bristle when people say the afterlife. It's not the afterlife. That's life. This is the pre-life. This is the corridor that we're walking, that we're traversing to get to the ballroom. And our choices and our behavior and our decisions and our priorities and our values that we have here will determine our viability in the world to come, in the afterlife. Will we have life? Depends. Did we take the steps? The requisite steps needed to infuse ourselves with life. And in our Parsha, we discovered, you want life? Cleave to God. Cleave to His Torah. Study His Torah. Perform His mitzvos, the statutes, and the laws. And you will have life today, meaning forever. That's a pretty good bargain. That's a pretty good value proposition. And this perhaps would explain why people have been obsessed, been fanatically obsessed with Torah from time immemorial. It's just literally the best thing you could do with your time. The best thing that you could do with your resources. The best thing you could do with the opportunities granted to you in your lifetime, in your pre-lifetime here, is to ensure that you have a robust and vital and viable life in the afterlife. What people call the afterlife, what we actually call life. I want to suggest a third idea, a third definition of life that we can use to explain this theme, this concept in our Parsha and in the Torah more broadly. We are on the doorstep of the month of El. In a couple of weeks, we're going to begin the month of preparation for the high holidays. And when we get to the high holidays, we're going to have Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And we're going to say numerous times, Zachreinu l'chaim. Remember us for life. Melech chafetz b'chaim, a king who is desirous of life. V'chasvein b'sefer chaim, and inscribe us in the book of life. L'mancha Elokim chaim, a life that is for you, our God. And at the climax of Rosh Hashanah, we say that the books of the living and the books of the dead are open, and 3 books are open, and who will live and who will die, that is determined on that day. And the Talmud says explicitly that the wicked on Rosh Hashanah, they are condemned to die right away. And we ask the question, and we puzzle over this, because you would expect there to be a big spike in deaths on Rosh Hashanah. And as far as I know, we don't see that. We don't see an unexplained, from a medical perspective, an unexplained spike in deaths every Rosh Hashanah. But the Talmud says that the wicked, they're condemned to die right away on Rosh Hashanah. So what our sages explain to us is that actually, in the eyes of God, and by a certain definition of life, when the wicked are judged on Rosh Hashanah, they die instantly. But what were to happen if at the stroke of midday on Rosh Hashanah, 25% of the world just keels over? They all die. Just a synchronized heart attack across the world. What would happen the next day? Or a week later, everyone's been buried. Imagine you're a survivor of that. And it happens every year, right? There's this culling of all the sinners every Rosh Hashanah. If that were to happen in a way that we can appreciate, none of us, if we're lucky enough to survive, none of us would have any free will going forward. Because no one would have any doubt that if you disobey God, you're doomed. And it's all real. So what the sages tell us is that the wicked, they're condemned to die in Rosh Hashanah. And they're dead. But they're kept alive for the sole sake of not corrupting the free will of those who are truly alive. And what this means is, man, when we say man, it means mankind. Humanity. We're not just alive like a plant is, right? Now, no one will say that a plant, it's alive, it grows, it could have descendants, it could reproduce. If it's alive like we're alive. Of course, no one says that. Because it's alive, but it's not alive in the same way that, let's say, an animal is. And an animal is not alive the same way that a human is. That's well accepted. But the Torah tells us that mankind is the purpose of creation. Because humanity can impact the direction of the universe. The Almighty, so to speak, gives us the keys to determine what happens in the world. We can alter the trajectory of God's creation. And we could bend the world towards perfection, or, God forbid, we could corrupt ourselves and the world around us. That power is what we call free will. And that's the goal of creation. To create an arena in which mankind, can exercise free will and determine what happens to them and what happens to the whole world around them. Well, if that's the goal of creation, why are there other things? Why are there animals? Why are there birds? And why are there plants and trees and algae and rocks and constellations and galaxies and solar systems? Like, why do we have everything else? The things that are above us, so to speak, spiritually, things that are below us, the angels. Why do they exist? If the purpose of creation is for humanity, why does everything else exist? And the answer is because everything else serves as the arena in which we get to exercise our free will. God first creates the arena. Look at Genesis. And once everything else has been created, the angels and the demons and the rivers and the isthmuses and the peninsulas and the mountains and the mesas and the valleys and the canyons and the North Pole and the South Pole and the solar system and Pluto and all the galaxies and all the birds and all the trees and all the mammals and all the marsupials and the whales and the sharks, everything. Once everything is created, the arena is ready, God creates one man. That's the goal. Once everything's set, that's the goal. When someone dies, by the definition of Torah, they get transformed from being a person, an Adam-like figure who can influence the whole world, to being part of the set, to being part of the arena, to being a non-player character in this enterprise. And they may appear alive, and they have a heartbeat, and they have brain activity. But what are they here to do? What is the scope of the impact that they can have? It's very, very limited. They're part of the set. They're an extra. They're part of the environment. They're part of the arena in which those who are truly alive are living and making decisions and impacting the trajectory of creation. It's not only the birds and the trees and the rocks and the angels that are part of the set for humanity. There are some Homo sapiens as well who died on Rosh Hashanah. They're dead. They appear to be alive, but their role is to serve as an arena for the free will of others. And this is a very scary thought. I think it's maybe even more scary than actually dying is the consideration that maybe we're alive, but we're actually dead by this standard. We want to live. We don't want to be the furniture. We don't want to be part of the set. How do we do that? How do we ensure that we matter on a cosmic level? The way we do that is via the Torah. It's laying a claim to life. The verse tells us, you want life? Cleave to God. Display an interest in being an actual human. And again, for us, to the naked eye, the actual human and the pretender, the NPC, they're indistinguishable. On Rosh Hashanah, we pray, give us life. Not just the life of being there to serve others, of being there, of being part of this grand set that the Almighty created for us, being part of this tapestry that the Almighty wove for us. We want to actually matter. And the way we do that is by choosing to be part of those select few. How many people are actually alive by this standard? How many people are actually wrestling with some sort of difficult decisions about what to do with their life, having to actually wrestle in the way Adam and Eve did in the garden? I suspect it's very, very few. It's, in my opinion, it's definitely not billions of people. Maybe not even millions. There's very few. And of course, all of us are nodding and saying, well, thank God I'm a real player. I'm not an NPC, but I don't know. I'm not so sure that all of us qualify. I don't know. I hope that we qualify, that I qualify, that you qualify. But it's certainly not everyone. And that's a very terrifying thought. And that's what we want. That's what we're asking. We want to matter, to really matter, to be part of those who are playing the game, not just those who are serving as part of the environment. And how do you do that? Via the Torah. You do a mitzvah. You say, this is the Almighty's mitzvah. Okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to overcome the challenges that are entailed with doing that. I'm going to cleave to God via His Torah. And that will give me life. And again, it's hard for us to think about this. We don't have the tools to evaluate who is actually a player and who's an NPC, a non-player character. But we know what we need to do to matter, to get a life. That's what we want. Now we know what we need to do. May we all be so fortunate as to be players who impact the world, who play an Adam-like role in hopefully propelling the world forward. As we mentioned, this is the week of Tisha B'Av. We believe that humanity, Adam's descendants, they can change everything. We can change everything. We can bring God into the world. We can restore God to His throne in this world. We can make this world indistinguishable from the world to come, from the heavenly world. That is within our wheelhouse. Ours as in humanity at large. But the more we're connected to the spiritual domain, the more of a say that we have in determining the direction and the trajectory and the destiny of humanity, of mankind, and of this wonderful enterprise and project that the Almighty created for us. Hopefully, we'll witness better times, better days in the days and weeks and months and years upcoming. May we all witness the revelation of God in the world, the restoration of God to His throne in this world. And that will be manifested, of course, with the Messiah and with the temple, and hopefully we'll all be around to witness that. I thank you for listening. This was a delight. I'm currently recording from a public library in Ontario, and I'm in a room that has these very, very large glass doors, and I'm facing the library, and people are walking by all the time, and everyone's looking into this pod quizzically. What's that guy doing? He's got a microphone, and he's smiling and gesticulating wildly. And they don't know unless they're listeners. They don't know that we're enjoying the Parsha podcast together. My name is Yaakov Wolbe. Nice to meet you. Email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Send me an email. Questions, comments, or feedback. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, a wonderful Shabbos. May we get together in good times, in good health, and in good spirits, and continue to study the Almighty's Torah together. The email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.